Hey everybody, and welcome to The Conversation. We're so glad that you've taken the time to join us on the episode today. This podcast is brought to you by Capital Community Church. We are thrilled to have longtime missionaries and friends of CCC, Allan and Georgene Shalm, joining us on the podcast today. The Shalms are veteran missionaries, having spent more than 4 decades on the mission field in various parts of Asia, namely in Pakistan and Malaysia. In this current season, they base out of Ontario, Canada, and they still travel extensively to bless the work of the kingdom around the world. Allan and Georgene are parents to Kamala, Jordan, and Coel, and they are proud grandparents to 7 grandchildren. From the time they were married in 1972, the Shalms knew that the mission field was where God would take them. It was just a question of when and where. After a season of pastoring in Ontario, they were appointed as missionaries to Pakistan in 1980, and that began what would become a storied missions career. In the episode today, the Shalms discuss all things missions. They recount their path into missionary work, they share stories of God's power and provision, and they reminisce of their connection to CCC through the years. You're in for a great episode today. I do trust that it will bless, encourage, and bring direction to you. So thanks once again for joining us. Without further delay, enjoy the conversation. I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us today on the podcast. Thanks for joining the conversation. And special thanks to our guests on the podcast today, Brother Allan and Georgene Shalm. And we're grateful for your time. I wonder if you would take a moment, each of you, and greet our listeners today.
Very happy to be here. We always love coming to CCC. And have grown to love the folks in the church here in a great way.
Hello to everybody. This is an honor and a privilege for us to be able to share some of the great life that we've had serving the Lord with all of you.
Well, we're grateful. And also at the table, we have Pastor Jack, who spent time on, was it 1 or 2 separate occasions?
Two times, yep.
Yeah,
Twice.
2 separate occasions in Pakistan. So he's around the table today. Much wisdom and exposure to the Shalms ministry on the field. So, Pastor, why don't you greet our listeners as well?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to say hello. We're so honored to have this couple with us. They're actually here for our Fresh Fire conference this week, but we're leveraging that time to connect and share their ministry and valuable history with us. We know that preaching is powerful, but sometimes just exposing people to your personalities and your history allows us to see a different vantage point, and we know how much we love you guys, and we also know how much our audience would love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and amen. So we have been instructed by you, Sister Shalm, to be sure to address questions to one or the other, and we'll do that as much as possible, because this is not a negative thing either, but you tend to just
Jump
dive
right in.
So if for some reason we forget and that happens, we will just follow up questions by saying, Brother Shalm, do you have anything to add to that? We'll flow with it.
And we don't want to take that from you because that's who you are, so don't lock up on us.
Yeah, please just let it flow. Be natural. You've brought a copy, and I brought one also, but you wrote recently, in recent years, Allan was away, and so some of the stories I'm sure that we'll talk about today are also in the book. Just briefly, if somebody wanted to purchase a copy of that book, where can they get it?
They can get it from PPH,
Okay.
Pentecostal Publishing House. Unfortunately for Canadians, they charge a lot for shipping. I have about 40 copies left at my house.
Wow.
So if somebody wanted to contact me, I would be able to send them a copy. It's $20.
All right, wonderful.
Would we be able to leave a link in the...
Yeah, we can leave a link in the description for
sure.
PPH.
Sure.
And figure out a way for them to get in touch with you if necessary.
We won't leave your address.
Oh, thank you.
They'll just come knocking on the door.
Yeah.
Good morning.
So why don't we begin this conversation kind of at the beginning of your missions journey as a couple. I know that it starts much before that. Both of you have missions exposure growing up, correct? Or was it primarily Brother Shalm? I know that you grew up in India.
Right. Yeah, I was born and raised in India. Georgene's parents were home missions.
Okay, home missions, that's right.
So we had missions at heart, but to just different areas.
Different locations.
Right. So you were married in 72,
Yes.
correct? And you pastored in Ontario for a season for several years, and then you felt the call to go to get more involved in missions, and India seemed like a plausible, reasonable place to go. And you had just found out you were pregnant with your first child, and you decided to just go for it. And I think the words that your family said, in your words, were, "What are you thinking?"
Exactly.
So just tell us about that season going to India. Just let's start the conversation there today.
Well, for Georgene, it would be the experience, I guess. Probably better her to explain that. For me, it was going home. So,
Yeah, I had heard from the Shalm family. We'd been married almost 8 years by then, and they just constantly talked about India. We ate curry, we listened to Indian music. It was just like an onslaught of India for 8 years. And Allan was actually very thoughtful that he said, "Let's go for a month just to see how I can adjust." And at the end of the month, I basically said, "I will never come back."
Wow. I didn't know that part of the
No,
story.
I will never come back.
we did travel third class and stayed in very, very
Yeah, we stayed
poor
in the
places.
YMCA and
Well,
rode on the bus.
That was the better place.
Yeah, rode on the bus. I got really, really sick and terrified. I mean, it was terrifying. It was such a complete shock for me. But I told him, "Do not mention India. Do not mention it." And he did really well. He didn't say anything. And over the next 2 or 3 months, the Lord just...
I watched the slides alone.
Yes,
and
he
we've
did.
taken-
All the pictures.
All right.
Yeah,
All
and,
pictures, right?
I just felt slowly, gradually, I felt the Lord kind of changing my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that was our destiny, really. I knew that Asia, but it was so confronting just to be there. We were on a shoestring budget, and I mean, it was a tough month. But I think the Lord let me see the worst part at the beginning, because after that was about the worst it ever was, really, that month.
Living over there is different than just visiting, especially if you're traveling like we were, on a very cheap budget. But if you're living there, you develop...
You have your own home, and
you develop a pattern of living that...
makes it much more comfortable.
What would be the most notable difference in your mind between a North American lifestyle and India, Eastern Asia generally?
For me, the situation was you have to fight for everything. If you want to pay your electricity bill, you stand in the sun in a long line for an hour and a half, and it's 40 degrees Celsius. And you finally get to the counter. I remember the first time I went to pay it, I finally got to the counter, and the guy said, "Sorry, we're closing now. Come back tomorrow." And so that's the kind of thing that you face all the time. If you could do one thing in a day, if I could go to the bank and cash a traveler's check, that was a successful day. It was just
There's obstructions.
Yeah.
Everything you try to do, there's obstructions.
A lot of corruption that kind of plays into
Just
that as well.
the traffic, and they shut down roads. They don't tell you're coming out of your neighborhood, and all of a sudden the main road is closed, so you can't get out of your neighborhood today. And I mean, it's just random things like that. And you become very aggressive. You have to be aggressive. Just going to the post office, people step in front of you, and you're constantly saying to people, "Excuse me, I was in the line. You need to get behind." And it makes something in you that in the North American culture is very unattractive, because here people are polite. They don't do that. They don't push and shove. And so you're always kind of trying to balance this aggression that you need. You have to have that to survive, versus just calming down and behaving yourself when you come back to North America.
I was very mild-natured, actually, and I'm an introvert, so it put some steel in my back, I guess, having to deal with things. I did learn over time. I used to get frustrated and a little bit angry, but I learned over time that you just are persistent. You just keep pushing. You keep your tone of voice normal, but you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. That's how they do it.
Wise as serpents, harmless as doves comes to mind. Just really before we move on from that, like being pregnant and having a baby in India, right?
By the time Kamala was actually born in Canada.
Oh, okay.
right after we were appointed. But I did have 2 children after that. Jordan and Kuel were both born in Pakistan.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where my mind was going with differences, but obviously you felt comfortable being pregnant in a foreign field and having babies.
They were born on a table similar to
Just
this.
like yes, yeah. There was no in the delivery room in the little hospital where I delivered the babies. The only equipment they had was a scale to weigh the baby. So
If there had been any complications, it might have been dicey.
we would have been out of luck. But you know what? It was as if the Lord just blanked my mind. We went for a tour of the hospital before Jordan was born, and it never even crossed my mind to ask, "Do you have any kind of equipment if there's issues with the delivery?" My mind didn't even go there. If it had, I probably would have been in a total panic. But I was just like, okay, it's going to be okay.
A lot of the questions that we kind of came up with together came from Pastor, and Pastor, you had mentioned in one of your questions about their parents and how much of that, their ministry or missions desire came from that. So I wonder if you would comment on that. Go ahead.
Me to comment?
Yeah, just that.
One of the things that crossed my mind was with the Great Commission emphasis from your parents. Do you feel like that is where you had the sense of obligation, or was it very much a personal calling? I mean, you mentioned a moment ago, and it still surprises me that India was home to you. It wasn't to her. Mm-hmm. But yet you both converged and became so dynamic in the field. I was just curious about, we know your parents were both incredible in their areas of ministry, district superintendent of Ontario, powerful missionary, and then involved in the local ministry here. When they were always involved in ministry. So was it do you feel like it was just a continuation of their ministry into your lives, or was it very personal?
I mean, obviously their ministry impacted what we did, but we each had our own individual calling.
Very definitely had a calling.
At the time that I was coming home to Bible college, the Indian government had a policy, and Canadian government as well at that time, that you had to choose when you were at 21. Because being born in India, I could choose either way, to become an Indian citizen or Canadian. And people didn't travel in those days like they do now. I thought, if I become an Indian citizen, I may never see my family again when they go home. I mean, who knows how this is going to... And I was only 18 years old. You don't have all the answers to everything at that particular juncture. So I was at a youth camp just before Bible school started. It was in the Ontario youth camp. And the preacher preached a message. There were probably 400 or 500 people there, but I felt like I was the only person in the building. Mm-hmm. And he made the comment that someone is here right now, and this man was used in the gifts of the Spirit. So, I mean, he was very powerful. But he said somebody is in the throes of making a decision, and he said, if you make the wrong one, you will probably not make it at all. And
which decision?
I remember watching him running to the altar.
Wow.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, I mean, we were in a small town of Picton. That's where the Bible college was at the time where we were going, and only about 5,000 people. I'm walking down the main street, and there's an Indian family, and that's before the deluge of Indians came to Canada. And they invited me to their home. They said, no, we think that it's possible for you to have citizenship and still travel and everything. Well, they didn't have the right information, but it was the Lord confirming to me that, don't worry, I've got everything taken care of. So
you chose Indian citizenship?
No.
He chose
Canadian.
to keep Canadian citizenship.
Ultimately, yeah. But the Lord had just used that kind of as a...
Are you willing, if
like
necessary?
Abraham taking Isaac up the mountain.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing for me. But after that, I wanted to go back. I mean, that was the...
I think there was a time, too, in the... missions conference at Greenwood Church in Toronto, where you were really struggling, and you went home to our apartment to pray.
Yeah, brother Paul Cook, who was the regional field supervisor, that's what they called him in those days. Now it's regional director, but he was at the missions conference in Toronto, and most churches in the area attended. We did too, and I knew he was gunning for me in his message, but. I had to go home in between sessions, and I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, you know that I want to go back to India, but I don't want to go because that's what I want. I want to know that it's you that's calling us. And it wasn't an audible voice, but it might as well have been, because the Lord spoke to me. He said, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He said, you were born there so that when you get back, you will be able to hit the road running. You already know the culture. And so, still get emotional about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Shalm, what about your personal call?
It's going to sound crazy, but I kind of grew up knowing that I was different from a lot of other kids. I was a bit of a loner. We were in home missions. We didn't have a lot of young people in our church. It was just my sister and me, and then after a while we had a little brother. And I just felt like my path was different. I was social. I loved having friends and had a good time. But there was something inside of me. I knew that my path was going to be different from most of my friends. When I was about 13, I started to feel a definite, not a sense of direction that I was specifically going to be a missionary, but I felt the Lord separating me. We used to have a lot of missionaries come through our church. I would sit on the front row and just squall and bawl and cry, and they always stayed in our house. In those days, that's how they did it. And we'd sit around the dining room table. My dad would say I didn't have to go to school the next day. I could stay up late and be in on the conversation. So we'd be up like till 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'd just be enraptured listening to the stories and the things. And there was such something inside of me that I wanted to do something exceptional. I didn't just want to be the same as everybody else. I wanted to do something exceptional. And then I went to Bible school, and it was like just nudging. I kept going in that direction. And then we got together when it was my 3rd year of Bible school, his 2nd year. And it was just like click. It was just, this is it.
I think you had an experience at Portland, the general conference there.
I did. It was 1970. And Brother Miller was the preacher in the Foreign Missions Service. He's recently passed away. He was a missionary in Ireland at the time, I think.
England, yeah.
England, Ireland, somewhere. And I was alone, and I was way up in the cheap seats at the back of the auditorium. And it was the same thing as when Brother Cook was preaching, and Allan said he felt like he was the only one in the room. It was the same thing for me. Brother Miller was preaching about the call of God, and it was just like the building emptied out. And when they made an appeal at the end, it took me about 10 minutes to get to the altar, because you have to come down all those stairways and everything. And I found a little place at the altar. There was all this crowd of young people there. And Brother Billy Cole's wife, Shirley, she came over to me. They'd known me when I was a kid. And she saw me, and she came, and she talked to my ear, and she said, Georgie, this tonight is a game changer. Like, God's got something for you, and just follow. And after that service, when I was walking out, I met a student that had been at our Bible school, and he was with Allan Shalm. That wasn't when we connected, but that was the first night that I met him. And it just felt like things are falling into place. We took it, it was not, there was no big emotional highs. It was very methodical, just following the next door that opened.
Right.
Just walking through the next door that opened.
Yeah, and I like that. Both kind of highlighted by an anchor moment, or at least a couple anchor moments, but very progressive at the same time.
Yeah.
Why don't we transition to the time when you folks, of course, there was time in India, and then eventually would you say kind of the main focus of your ministry in those early years was Pakistan or Pakistan?
We actually never even got to be in India as resident missionaries. When we went, to apply, they refused us. They said, "You've had missionaries in India for 200 years,
Oh,
and
I
we're
see.
still a Hindu nation. So thanks, but no thanks." So that's when Allan was with Brother Cook, and they went into Pakistan, and they met with, I think it was Brother Don Hanscom.
All
and
the missionaries were Tracy's.
they were all meeting together because of Brother Cook being there. And they said, "Well, why don't you come to Pakistan? Canadians don't even need a visa to live here."
Mm-hmm.
And the Hanscoms, Brother Don Hanscom and Sister Sandra Hanscom, were coming home on deputation. So they said, at least come for a year. That was the original plan, come for a year.
And how many years ultimately were you guys?
30.
So it stuck. So I'm going to get Pastor to, reminisce about memories being there, but let's just kind of start that season. Pastor, any memories from your time there that you'll kind of elaborate on together?
For sure, there's memories, and I tell people I have a great bad memory because I often forget way too much that I shouldn't forget, but I also forget the bad things about people, so I just call it a great bad memory. However, I would say that I was literally trying to remember. Maybe it is only one time that I've been there, but there was enough experience in that one trip that it feels like a few times. I think just the services were powerful for sure. The convention was incredible, but the exposure to the people was very moving, and to watch you interact with the team and the folks that have come under the wing of your ministry, I think it was the highlight for me. And just a few memories that I have. I mean, just this year shift in culture to when we crossed over the sea into those nations, and that nation was remarkable. But to you guys, it was just routine. It was so normal, very different from North America, obviously, but simple things like going through the market and where people lived. There was literally it looked to me like a 4x8 block with a mattress in there, and there's a family sitting in on the mattress, and that of course we know there's poverty, and we're blessed in some ways in this nation, but then to also observe the family connections that those people have and how that's built. Anyway, that just some of the culture,
Well, if you came now, at least they have Tim Hortons.
They do. We have Tim Hortons in Lahore.
Wow.
Well, I remember that we went to McDonald's. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Literally a big deal. But I think just, when you looked at the team and that you had, was Brother Arthur Curry one of the first?
Yes.
Yes,
That's an
I can
incredible
remember.
story.
I can remember in 1960, my parents had been with another oneness organization, and they were switching over to the UPC. And so we were in Vancouver. That's where my mom's home was. And Brother Arthur Curry came back from Pakistan. He had actually been there as an engineer building a hydroelectric dam for the electricity. And while he was there, he had felt a real burden for the country and done what he could. And I can remember him. I was 8, 9 years old at the time. But he's sitting around the table and just weeping as he was telling my dad. He said the Lord had given him a vision in the 40s, early 40s, I believe it was, that one day he would be in a country that started with PA. Well,
And ended with an N.
And he said, well, Pakistan wasn't even in existence at that time. He thought maybe it's Palestine.
Wow.
And but then the Lord took him there, and so he was there at that time. But then later in 65 or 66, he and his family went back to the city of Karachi and were building another nuclear plant for electricity. And while he was there, he started having meetings. On a Sunday, he would go to 7 different areas of the city. He'd miss the song.
He wasn't a preacher. He was
an engineer.
Yeah, he would just go in and start and preach them. And so we were going back from our furlough, and he asked us to come and stop there. And so my dad went and taught a Bible study or a seminar on the oneness. And I remember us driving out to the Arabian Sea on buses, and they baptized, I think, 37 people. As far as we know, those are the first people,
yeah.
being baptized in Jesus' name in Pakistan.
That's amazing.
But Brother Curry was very instrumental in getting the work done.
Well, he was part of the church in St. John
Yes.
when I was a kid.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you had 100 people in the room, bro, like you wouldn't pick Arthur Curry.
No.
Very quiet, reserved, articulate, but not like dynamic and person. You know, he's just that he took his secular occupation and turned that into, but a very spiritual man, like very.
He wept a lot. I mean, he was a great, big, husky man, but he had a very tender spirit.
Right.
And I remember that about him a lot.
Yeah, Arthur and Zola.
There's no way when you were sitting around that kitchen table watching that man crying about Pakistan that you would have ever dreamt.
Well, I mean, India and Pakistan were enemies.
Yeah.
Right.
We always thought that's the enemy, you know.
Because that's right. That dynamic is there.
Yeah.
But the
God
Lord
works in mysterious ways.
Yes.
So, kind of back to the, you mentioned one martyr, a very sensitive nation to work in terms of preaching the gospel. I wonder if there's any close calls or, doors that the Lord just shut at the right moment or opened at the right moment. Any of those miraculous moments of protection that come to mind?
Do we have time for me to tell a
Please,
story?
Please.
In 2002, our oldest daughter, Kamala, was getting married. So we came home for the wedding. It was in Stockton, California. And while I was there in the summer, I felt very strongly an impression, and I didn't know if it was coming from the Lord or from the devil, actually, that said, when I went back to Pakistan, I was walking into death. And at that time, I was working at the international school. That's how we were paying for our kids to get educated. So I was going back ahead of Allan, and it was Coel was the only one coming back at that time. And so when I told Allan, and he said, well, do you want to cancel? And I said, no, I'll go back. I just feel like I'm being warned. I don't know if it was trying to make me afraid or whatever, but I went back. I was at my office in the school, and the school superintendent walked across the open area in front of my office, and I could tell the way he was walking that he wasn't happy about what he was coming to say. So he walked in and sat down, asked me about the wedding because he knew Kamala very well, and then he said, "Well, actually, Georgene, I've just had a phone call from the American Embassy, from the regional security officer," and I knew who that was, and he said he asked me if we had somebody named Georgene Shalm working at our school, and I told him yes, she's our elementary secretary. So he said, okay, I want you to hang up the phone, go over to her office, tell her to turn off her computer, pick up her purse, and drive to the airport. She should get on the first flight leaving Pakistan. It doesn't matter where it's going, just get out of Pakistan. So I said, well, I live here, Rob. I can't just get out and that's not possible. I said, Alan's not even here right now. He's coming back from Canada in another few days. I can't just up and leave. And he said, I'm telling you what he told me. He was very serious, that you're supposed to get out. And I said, well, I can't, so I'm not leaving. The school hired a guard for our house, and just for that week or so until Allan got back. And life went on. Well, then, just about at that time, there were 4 attacks on. One was a Christian hospital, one was a missionary boarding school, one was a Catholic church, and one other Christian organization, a terrorist attack against them. And I was cooking supper, and the phone rang. It was Brother Howell on the other end of the line. And he said, Brother Shalm, I'm embarrassed, actually, to call you because I lived in El Salvador during the Civil War. And people kept telling me to leave, get your family out of there, get your family out. You need to leave El Salvador. And he said, I did not leave. And so he said, I'm somewhat embarrassed with what my message to you. But he said, I'm calling you to tell you, you get out of Pakistan right away. You and your wife and Coel need to leave Pakistan. And so I'm thinking, when Allan gets off the phone, walking into death. Okay, there's something going on here. So within 3 or 4 days, we got on a plane. We came to Fredericton. We were here for a year at that time. And after a year, we did deputation again, said we're missionaries to Pakistan. No idea if we'd ever get back or not, but raised our money, and we eventually did go back. Well, we'd had a lady that we met. She came to church one time. She was very strange kind of behavior. And she was UPC background, but she wouldn't talk to us. She wouldn't say anything. It was just
from the American Embassy.
Embassy, yeah. It was a very, very strange encounter. Well, when we're on that deputation, we met her in a church in the States, and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Of course I remember you. What happened to you? You disappeared. Like, what's the deal?" So she explained that she'd been sent on a mission, had to leave Pakistan, and she was being very evasive even then. And obviously she was working for a security agency in the United States. So she said to me, "So what's happening with you guys?" And I said, "Well, we were evacuated for a year. Our missions director made us come home, and now we're on deputation." And I told her a little bit about all those bombings and everything. And I said, sometimes jokingly, I was actually making a joke. I didn't really think it. I said, sometimes we think maybe we're on Al-Qaeda's hit list or something. And she just stopped. And she said, "I am not supposed to tell you this, but I've actually seen a list that from undercover people, I have seen a list of Al-Qaeda targets in Pakistan, and your names were on that list." Wow. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized walking into death. That's what that was all about. I was walking into death. They were looking for us. And the Lord miraculously got us out of there. Well, fast forward now to 2014, and we were in a church, our last service for that particular deputation, and we were talking to a lady. She said that she and her husband met us on our first deputation in 1981, and they had prayed for us every day since then, and they had supported us financially until 2008, when the financial crisis happened. Their company went bankrupt, and they were not allowed to have any, the bank wouldn't let them have any financial things that were regular payments. But she said, "We've continued to pray for you every day." And then she said, "Oh, that was so nice of your husband to call me back in 2002 when you guys were evacuated out of Pakistan." And I said, "My husband called you?" I mean, he didn't call anybody. He didn't call me hardly when he goes away. It's just not in our, it's just not something we do. I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, and the amazing thing is we have an unlisted number." That was the days before cell phones. "We have an unlisted number. How did he get our number?" And I'm thinking, I don't know, like we were in chaos. We were trying to close out our house and figure out Coel's schooling. And there was, why would Allan call somebody he'd met in 1981? Like, that didn't even make sense. So I said, "What did he say on that phone call?" And she said, "Well, that's a funny thing." I mean, she was just kind of naive. "That's the funny thing." She said, I said, "Hello?" And he said, "I'm just calling to let you know we got the Shalms out in time." And I said, "You had a call from our angel."
Must. Yeah, wow. Absolutely.
I mean, it's just, even telling it now, and it's our story, and I'm like one giant goosebump. We got the Shalms out in time. Wow. You can never forget something like that. You can never forget. And so with all of the terrorism, all the confronting things that happened in 30 years, I mean...
Interestingly, when terrorism was at its height in Pakistan is when we had continuous crusades. And we've had up to, in those years, up to 25,000, 30,000 people in a service. And we never had one incident. And all the times of terrorism, nobody
Not one person from our church was ever hurt
or injured.
In a terrorist attack.
And one thing you do learn to be very sensitive to the Holy Ghost, when to go ahead and when to
put on the brakes.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say that, like, not that we seek to be spirit-led in North America, of course, but when you're in that environment, you have literally no choice but to lean on
clue in all the time.
and to lean on the Lord.
Well, and you've said it here many times, Sister Shalm and Brother Shalm, both of you have articulated this, that when you've done everything that you can do, organizing and planning, and then when the door closes, you both have just learned to roll with that, because that's how often, God gives us words and instruction, but then you've also learned that sometimes those closed doors are as important as the open ones.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We weren't trying to be not heroes, that's not the right word, but trying to, it wasn't our goal just to make headlines all the time by going into places and doing things. And so if our pastors talked to us and said, Brother Shalm, that's probably, you shouldn't go there today, we paid attention. They knew things. We weren't trying to just go rogue and, just, oh man, we're going to do all these exciting things. It was very much when we felt God saying, today's the day, do it today. And we paid attention to what people were talking to us that knew things that we wouldn't have access to that information.
Several notable speakers, including your bishop, come out and minister. And we've had several of them tell us that if all hell was breaking loose in Pakistan and we said, come on, we still feel like God's going to take care of this, they said, we'll come. But if there wasn't a cloud in the sky and you called and said, you better, I think maybe we need to rearrange the timing, they'd turn back even if they were on the way to
Well,
Pakistan.
actually, Alan, there's that, when Brother Cole was going to come, September of 2001, it would have been this weekend.
Yeah, and in January, the Holy Ghost spoke to me and said, you need to cancel that meeting. So that was 8 months in advance, and 9/11 happened that month.
Wow.
So
Yeah, and
you just have to learn
Pakistan
how to-
absolutely erupted after
you
that.
have to learn how to be sensitive to the Holy Ghost.
Sorry. No, please.
One of the things that we jotted down was, I said, would you agree that in the early part of Y2K or post Y2K, like early 2000s, when the field was being closed and a lot of aggression and concern, that God started increasing the vision for Asia during that?
Yes, we saw the greatest revival during that time of terrorism, when it was at its peak. And I mean, it's amazing that the government even let us hold meetings, actually, because the tension in the country was. We had one meeting in Islamabad that I felt the thing that I used as the fleece, if you want to call it that. I said, if the police give us permission, we'll go ahead with the meeting. Brother Eli Hernandez, Brother Doug Kleinens, and Brother James Stark were going to come and speak for us, and so we got permission. Right about that time, Benazir Bhutto, who had been the former prime minister, was coming back into the country because they were going to have an election. They had a huge procession coming in Karachi, and terrorists attacked her vehicle. 156 people died. She was spared at that time. But then we had our crusade in October. In the month of December, 1 kilometer from where we had our crusade, she was assassinated. And so, and a week after our crusade ended, within several hundred meters of the crusade location, terrorists blew up a police checkpost and killed a bunch of people. So we know that in the middle of all of that, God was orchestrating and showing that He had His hand. It was almost like the Israelites in
in Egypt.
In Egypt, Goshen, they were in the land of Goshen, and Egypt was going through all these plagues, and Goshen was spared. Spared. So it was almost like a situation like that. I mean, there are times when there are martyrs, but when God has a specific purpose, it doesn't matter what the devil tries to do. Nothing can stop it.
Was it during that time, Pastor, that we received the offering for the Shalms when they were here, or were they back on the field? I just remember a story. I was younger, and so I'll lean on others' wisdom.
I think it was when they first landed back here, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
but there was a need, a missions need.
It was a big offering. It was like
2002.
It was the biggest offering you'd ever raised in this church, I think. Yeah.
So
I can't remember what was going on
I
at the time.
can't remember what the offering was for, but I do remember that we felt a strong need to take it. And of course, Pastor Woodward.
We felt a very strong connection here, and my wife can tell you the story of how there was some trouble going on, and she just felt like
There'd been a bomb. There'd
Yeah.
been a bomb in Islamabad. My husband was out of the city at the time. It was a Sunday, and I went to church in the morning, and then during the afternoon, I was really upset. I just felt like he's never here when these kind of things happen, and the whole neighborhood
Well, the
was
bomb
shut
had-
down.
yeah, bomb
And
had shaken
it
the
happened
house.
right in our neighborhood. I mean, it was just a couple blocks over from where we lived, and so it would have been Sunday morning here in Fredericton, and it was Sunday night in Pakistan. And I actually got ready to go to bed, and then I thought, I'm going to just watch the service in Fredericton. That was in the days when it wasn't live streaming or anything. You know, you had to do all the buffering and everything, and I'd already shut the computer off, so it had to warm up and get online, find the internet, and all of those
the
things.
fire going.
Yes, and finally, you know, the screen was there, and at that exact moment, when the picture of the church is finally on my screen, and I had the voice, and your dad, Brother Woodward, stepped up. The praise singers were singing, and he stepped up and interrupted them, and he said, "Folks, I don't know what's going on in Pakistan right now, but God has just spoken to me and said we need to pray for the Shalms." And I'm sitting there in front of my computer,
Whoa.
feeling like I couldn't believe that was happening. And the church just went into travail. I remember I could see Brother Philip's bald head, the light reflecting on his bald head.
Back when we had low resolution.
Yes. And I was like, I know them, I know. And people were just bent over in their pews praying. And I felt like, Lord, I'm this little person over here, millions and millions of people, and you saw my fear. You saw what I was struggling with today, and you intercepted that service. Just
well, we feel like
so
the year
I know
we
that.
spent here when we were evacuated after 9/11 was a very crucial one. It made a special connection with us in this church, and probably as much as any church anywhere, we have felt that special connection.
We felt
and,
too.
Have depended on your prayers.
Yeah. Well, we knew
Yeah.
people here were praying for
Yeah.
us.
Well, just to kind of button up that comment about the offering, I've heard the comment so many times over the years, excuse me, that, we took up that offering and it was significant at the time. And I think it was my grandfather, Raymond
Well,
Sr., who
Yeah.
said, well,
Well, Pastor, sorry.
No, please
I'll let you
clarify.
finish.
Well, my memory is
Yeah.
foggy, so that's why I
Sorry.
certainly.
I remember Pastor coming in after the morning, and we knew about the need. It was in excess of $20,000, which at that point in time for CCC was, if
That's
I
a
remember
big-
it was 26,000, maybe 29,000. Up until that point, we had never had an offering like that for missions. And Pastor came in and he talked with your father or your grandfather,
Yeah.
and he said, because he was our treasurer, he said we're gonna pull on CCC to give this, and whatever doesn't come in, we're going to take it at a general. We're going to take it whatever we've got, anywhere we've got it, we're going to do it. And your grandfather said, well,
I need that to pay the bills, basically.
you better not cash your check on Monday. Literally.
Yeah. But it changed the
Yeah.
tone and tenor of the church, and the finances changed from
If you-
that day forward, basically.
Yeah, if you graphed the giving of CCC, that morning was an uptick, and it's never
Never gone
down.
back. Yeah.
It opened a spirit of generosity for our church. And the other part, I don't know if you remember, you got
ahead.
the evening service?
No, I don't. Was I there? Probably was there, but
what happened? So we gave that offering that morning, and your grandfather came in crying that night, and I get weepy too, because he came in and he said, I don't know where it came from, but we had $26,000 come in tonight.
That day. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the money came in for the morning for the offering, and then in excess of that, the giving came in. So God opened a spirit of generosity, and it's helped us become a missions mind. We just kind of said, if we give globally, God will bless locally. And that's not why we give, but that is part of the...
And the beautiful thing is that, I mean, you blessed us that time, but since then, there's been missionaries and mission fields all over the world that have been impacted by what happened that day.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really It's really
Sorry,
amazing.
Matt. To
No, that's exactly what I was aiming at, and the phrase that my father has made in even recent years, it's the church that missions build. And I think that was a turning point, tipping point, and it involved you folks, so I thought it was worth bringing up today. One question that you kind of wrote about was just the need to keep missions at the forefront, and how maybe that's a little bit more challenging in this season, because I Am Global does such a good job at keeping missionaries on the field. Deputations are shorter, less travel time needed in North America. So, let's open up a conversation about ways to keep missions a forefront for a local church, given that it does that. It opens something up supernaturally.
Our experience this last deputation, and we've done 10 now, this is probably the best overall deputation that we've had. The response as far as offerings, and what we did, we concentrated, because at this point we didn't really need to increase our PIM budget that much. I mean, we almost doubled what we were supposed to raise, but we found that churches were very, very open to projects, and we had some large projects, and they responded enormously. We never got that many large offerings overall. I mean, we might have had one or two before, but this time it was almost like a cascade of huge offerings for projects. And so people can still get involved there. The needs maybe have changed a little bit. It may not be quite as much for PIMs, but for projects, building churches,
Traveling.
yeah.
And nowadays, a lot of young people are getting involved in missions programs, AYC, Next Steps. There's a lot of areas, the AIM program, and churches can send their young people, get them involved. You can be on a Zoom call with a missionary that's in Taiwan or some faraway place, and you can be connected with them because of the internet. There's so many opportunities now. They don't actually have to physically be in your church in the building, but you can just have a little 5-minute slide. We've been involved 2 or 3 times with you all, making little 2-minute blurbs or something, and just keeping people informed about what's happening on the field. They tell us that nobody reads PIM letters anymore. I wish that was true, because I'm the one that has to do it every time. But I'm just getting information, what's going on, what the missionaries have been doing. Keep informed. A lot of them are on Facebook. Those of us that are working in Muslim countries, we have to be a little more cautious about talking about what we're doing. But
so the physical presence on North American soil maybe isn't as important as it once was, but creativity on the part of pastors and missionaries to collaborate and digitally expose people.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
We get a lot more visitors than we used to. So people get to come and see the work that's on ground. I mean, they're experiencing it. So then that builds an interest in missions as well.
Well, and I'd like to let you speak to that, because when you went, obviously it was very small, like the work. And you folks, we mentioned here, like you're both quick to smile. You love people, and to see you interact with the nationals, the people of Pakistan, it's wonderful. But could you speak to how you grew that from?
Well, when we went to Pakistan, there had been missionaries there, Brother and Sister Corcoran, Brother and Sister Don Hanscom, and Brother and Sister Tracy. The work was strong. It was new, and so it wasn't huge, but it was a strong work. They built a firm foundation, prayer and structure. Brother Don Hanscom was very good at structuring things from an administrative viewpoint, and the Corcorans were just strong on prayer and faith and believing God. They had a vision. They purchased a piece of land in Lahore for $20,000.
Something like that, which was large in those days.
That was back in the early 70s. And they built a Bible school. So all of those things were already in place. That property is now worth close to $2 million.
Wow.
Because we've built a new Bible school and whatever. So when we came in, it wasn't like we were the first people on location.
And Kathy's uncle is Gary Tracy.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
not negating. Not
We felt
acknowledging.
like, wow, we get to work with these people that had done amazing things. There had been a large crusade with Mark Hamby and Kenneth Phillips, and they'd seen really miraculous things happen. So we felt like this is going to be so really cool. We get to work with this. So we just tried to fit in. In the beginning, Allan was traveling into India 4 times a year, and we kind of shared responsibilities with Don Hanscom in Karachi. And then gradually, all of them, those 3 families, all left Pakistan physically in 1987. And so after that, the dynamics had changed somewhat. And I don't know. We loved living there.
Well, the Bible says that one plants, another waters, and God gives the increase.
Yeah.
And so they did things that we couldn't do because of our personalities and,
Right.
and whatever. And then we did things that they wouldn't have been able to done. Because that's just the way it is. God uses people in different ways. And I guess I'm kind of a visionary. I have dreams of what God can do. And so we just took, and God started challenging us in different areas.
And it's timing. There's a lot of it is timing, it's seasons. It was a time for Pakistan. All of the groundwork had been laid. There was a lot of faith. We had good men to work with, and it just escalated. And
Brother, my wife mentioned Brother Hanscom set up the
Structure.
Administrative,
and everything.
yeah.
I was the one that actually implemented it because the missionaries, naturally, it's
we had a
work.
lot of missionaries there.
Yeah, we had a lot of missionaries. They did most of the major responsibilities, handle the finance and all of that kind of thing. But I had to start, because all the other missionaries were gone, I started giving funds to the nationals to use, and you learn a little bit who you can trust, who you can't trust. And over time, we saw things grow to the point where today, and after we left the field, they've started 6 satellite Bible schools. Wow. We had the one in Lahore. Now we've got 6 satellite ones in major centers. They did that themselves. They're raising more money in the country now than the missionaries ever could see raised.
Wow.
Because their feeling was the missionaries are richer than us, so we'll go and ask them.
Let them do it.
But now when they're on the feet, when they're there and they have to raise their money, it's happening. Just one example, the largest district that we had, the superintendent at that time was always asking me for a monthly offering for the pastor's finance, to pay for their trip to the fellowship meeting, and they would give them food and so on. After I left, within about 2 years, a new superintendent had come in, and they were saying, what we're doing now is that pastors that come every month to the fellowship meeting and pay their tithes and give a report, we put their name in a hat, and with the money that's been coming in through the year, we're buying them a motorcycle. The top guy that gets his name drawn, a motorcycle. Well, I was there a couple of years ago, and they said, now we're giving 2 motorcycles, and the top pastor's wife gets a microwave oven.
They didn't even have electricity to run a microwave before.
So what I'm saying is they are starting to really take ownership. And I'm working with the present superintendent because I was the one that nationalized, turned it over to national leadership. But we got a fantastic man there. But for the last 2 years, he and I have been working with the idea of turning it to another national. Okay. So it would not be just missionary to national, but national to national. So it will set a precedent and start a process there. Yeah. And so that to me, in many ways, is even more exciting than the Crusades.
Sure.
To see the work actually
functioning
the way it's supposed
becoming
to.
autonomous. That's
responsible.
That's
You guys left Pakistan. What year was that you transitioned to Malaysia?
2012.
In 2012, and you've just recently transitioned to Ontario. You now live there in Canada. Just a little plug.
Have a flyby once in a while.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a new season, but of course there's such a strong connection and a burden for Asia. And I think Malaysia kind of was a season where it was a lot of, in and out, traveling around.
Right.
But just, I wonder if you would speak to just your burden, what you're believing the Lord for Asia and this end time harvest generally. Just speak to that if you would.
We have a real burden to put in the hearts of people around the world, and nowadays we are permitted to travel anywhere that we are invited. Since we started in Malaysia in 2012, I think I've preached in 40 different countries, some of them numerous times. But what we're trying to do now is encourage people to become a part of the end time harvest. A lot of people have felt like, well, what can I do? And we're trying to put tools in their hands, give them a vision to see that I can become a part of this thing. And by telling stories of what we've seen, what other missionaries are seeing, I think we can encourage people. And that's what I feel very strongly about now, is trying to impact people to get involved in the harvest. Not just pastors, but also local congregations. I want to see people understanding that God can equip the whole church to do the job. And that's what the fivefold ministry is. It's to equip the church to do the work of the ministry. So this is what I'm trying to do, and the Lord seems to be opening doors. It's interesting. The Lord told us 45 years, 50 years ago that we would be traveling internationally, and it didn't happen for 40 years. We were in Pakistan. I mean, that's international, but
we didn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, we're traveling.
We couldn't get in and out, and so we thought maybe that's what the Lord meant. And then all of a sudden it's opened up. And of course the experience that we have now is more beneficial than if we were traveling earlier when we didn't have that experience. But we are finding that we have been able to help a lot of churches change their view of what can take place, the possibilities of revival, and we're starting to get reports from different places that are starting to break out. So we feel encouraged by that. It's a different era for us now, different season.
Yeah, different season.
But
I really enjoy being involved with young people. That's kind of always been my thing anyway. I like young people, say from 15 to early 20s. They all have so much angst, and there's all kinds of things going on in their heads and so many questions, and I just feel like if you could connect with them and let them feel like this lady's safe, I can talk to her, and she's a safe person to talk to. I just see so much potential in young people that they want to do something. None of them feel like they're worthy, or, they've got all these questions in their heads about their self-esteem and everything. But if you can light the spark, there's just so many places it can go. We had a young man in Malaysia. What was that expression in Bali, Allan, that man that spoke to us? There was something about the people that you just give up on. He used a phrase, and I can't. Anyway, this young man, like if anybody wanted to be described as somebody you would give up on, it was him. He just kept making mistakes over and over, big mistakes. And we just kept working with him. He'd come to our apartment, and we'd talk and pray and counsel, and we went out, took him out to eat and took him places, and then he'd mess up again, a big mess, and then we'd start all over again. And we just kept at it. And he's applying for his ministerial license. He just sent me a link the other day where he preached, and I mean, it's just this amazing success story. And if we can replicate that over and over again, other people might pass over them and say, well, there's not a whole lot they can do. You probably would have passed over us. I mean, neither one of us we're just regular people. We don't have all these great talents. I could play the piano a little bit, and Allan can definitely preach, but we're not creative. We don't, we're not all, and yet God said, I think they can do something. And there's so many young people in our churches, and if they can just get that spark lit in them, they can do amazing things. So when we travel, I look for young people. I look for them in the service, and I go and talk to them and try to figure out how to encourage them a little bit.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
we watched you do that in Pakistan. Here for me, even encouraging us when you were here.
I remember one Sunday morning talking to you in the lobby, probably in 2002. Yeah, felt something really strong. And
Well, yesterday I spoke to Northeast Christian College. They had a special spiritual emphasis week, I think, before school opens. And I told them, you may have come from a hamlet here in New Brunswick. Most people around the world never heard of it. But it was out of a small place called Bethlehem that Jesus came and changed the world. And you have the same possibility of changing your world.
Amen.
And that's what we're trying to do, is light a spark. Give people hope that I can do something. I don't have to be ordinary. I don't have to be just a run-of-the-mill Christian. I can actually impact the world. And that's what we feel our real calling is at this stage of our life.
Pastor, before we'll kind of land the plane here, was there any question or anything any stone left?
I could spend a few hours talking to the Shalms, but we won't wear them out, or our audience, or you.
Well,
but I did have one question. Where do you
please.
see the next 10 years unfolding for you guys? Or is it just like you've lived the last 70, just trusting God and rolling with it?
Yeah, I guess so, but I feel like Caleb. Give me this mountain.
There you go.
I turned 72 next week sometime, and I feel like there's a lot that I can do. I see a lot of people, even younger than me, and they've sort of given up on life. And I feel like, man, I'm just winding up.
Well, that's what we see.
That's awesome.
we had our outbound when we finished our deputation. We had our outbound with Brother Slade, and there was only a couple of people in the meeting. It was by Zoom. So after they'd talked about us paying all our bills and whatever, I asked Brother Sladen, I said, Brother Sladen, I'm just curious. We're starting another 4 years. Do we have to retire at the end of 4 years if we're still feeling healthy? And if we're not making sense when we talk anymore, I hope we have enough intelligence that it's time to stay home. But do we have to retire? And he said, absolutely not. And I just kind of tucked that in and said, okay,
Obviously, physically, if things deteriorate, you can't go more.
We already feel like we don't have the same, what do you call
Stamina.
it? Yeah, stamina that we used to have a few
But you
years
learn
ago.
to pace yourself,
We
too.
do pace ourselves, yeah.
And I'm like,
Well, you're
before-
both doing wonderful.
We just came from Australia, landed here, and
Well, we didn't even
jumped
give you a
right in.
break.
So,
Maybe an hour.
Well, we took a break in Dubai. We stayed in Dubai for a day. So.
Okay. I might start, I don't know what food is your favorite or you eat a lot of, but we may start eating that food.
no, when we travel, we try to put breaks into things. We save up mileage points so that we can upgrade when possible on the longer
We're good with
trips.
that.
Whatever we can to make things a little bit easier. But overall, we feel pretty good. I exercise.
You know what?
every day.
We've loved being missionaries.
Yeah.
It's been, it's very humbling to feel that the Lord could have picked anybody. And he has access to every human being on the planet. He could have picked anybody. And we got picked. He saw something in Allan and Georgene Shalm. Maybe it's just stubbornness, I don't know. But he saw something and said, I can use them. And it's so humbling when you think that we got to participate with him. He wanted to do something, and he could have used anybody. But he asked us to participate with him. How do you say no? How do you say no? Some people do, I guess, apparently, but we've never figured out how to do that. And so as long as the Lord keeps opening doors for us, and we're not both pushing wheelchairs or something, we're just going to keep
walking
Yeah,
through.
keep going through the open doors.
Well, maybe we'll end this way. We always try to give the guests the last word. first, before we kind of get to that last closing comment or two, are there any final notable miracles over your time as missionaries? I mean, that story about the angel calling that lady is amazing. And if there's not, we can kind of skip over that. But is there anything else, any stories that we would just share to encourage the audience?
The thing that impacted me, because you always read about miracles in the Bible, and we had seen some miracles, even pastoring in Canada. But the thing I think that probably really impacted me the most, shortly after we arrived in Pakistan, the Hanscoms had to go on furlough. And so we were in Karachi alone, kind of navigating things, and they had started an annual convention. That's sort of like an evangelistic meeting in the city of Karachi. So because they were on furlough, we were arranging it that year. The guest speaker came, and on the last night, most people didn't have their own transportation, so we rented buses, and most of the people had left. But there was a family that came up to us at the end of the service, and the father was holding a young girl and in his arms, and he said, my daughter has been lame from birth, and that would be easy to see. I guess she was about 10 years old, but I could have taken my finger and thumb and put it around her leg. There was just basically skin and bone. And he said, we came here tonight to see her healed, and we made up our mind we will not leave until she is. So I called the evangelist, and he was a great man of faith, and I asked him to lead us in prayer. He did that. After he prayed for about 2 minutes, he looked at the father, and he said, I want you to put your daughter's feet on the ground and step back. And I was watching him closely. I could see fear kind of flicker through his eyes because, I mean, his daughter had never stood before, let alone walked. And so then I think he thought, well, I did say we're not leaving until she's healed, so I better obey the man of God. So very gingerly he put her feet on the floor and slowly stood back ready to catch her in case anything happened. And she stood there kind of swaying initially, and then she got stronger and stronger. And it appeared to me as though muscles were forming in her leg. And then he said to the little girl, now you start to walk in the name of Jesus. She started taking very hesitant steps. The stage was probably about 30 meters long. It was quite a fairly big one. But each step got stronger and stronger. She went to the end, turned around, walked back to the other side. And then she thought, this is no problem anymore. So she started walking backwards, stepping over top of obstacles. And when she left the place that night, nobody was carrying her. She walked out.
Wow.
And so that became, I've seen dozens of lame people healed since then, but that was the first one. And to me, that was my Peter and John moment at going up to the temple. Right. Jesus is gone now, so now we've got to do this thing. And so that was, to me, a very impressionable thing. And in fact, our youngest daughter was,
she was like 3, maybe 3,
2 or 3, somewhere around there. And she told her mom a few years ago, she said, that is the first living memory I have of anything in my life.
Wow.
Watching that little girl walking, yeah.
Wow.
So that was a seminal point in my experience, because it let me know, okay, this thing does work, and we had that confidence, and it just launches you for the future.
Well, we will close today. Thank you so much for your time, folks. Brother Shalm is preaching tonight, and so we are very appreciative of your time. I want to close by giving you the last word, each of you. We won't chime in and close it out. You guys will close us out. Why don't we go, Sister Shalm, just a word of encouragement, challenging word, whatever, and then Brother Shalm, you can follow up, and we'll just address and close it out with the audience today. Thank you again for being on the conversation. We love and appreciate you folks.
Final comment, I think I would say to anybody out here that's listening today to what we're saying, and you feel as if God is dealing with you to do something, stepping out of your comfort zone, don't hesitate. People question all the time, am I worthy? None of us are worthy. We're never going to be worthy. So if you feel the voice of God prodding you, take the first step. And once you do, it's just like Brother Shalm talked about the little girl being healed. Every step becomes stronger. It's not a bit scary for us anymore when we feel the Lord dealing with us about something, because we have so many experiences. We know that he doesn't fail. And so if somebody is feeling that and you're trying to decide, should I, shouldn't I? You should. You should get involved. Go to Bible school. Teach a Bible study. Do something that you have never done before. And you'll be amazed at what God will do with your life if you just give him a chance.
Yeah, I think that in connection with what Sister Shalm said, this is the hour of the church. If you look at the news, you'd think that the church is losing. I mean, things are going crazy in the world. Stuff you couldn't dream about even 10 years ago is happening today. But I believe in the greatest darkness, the light shines the brightest. And God is getting ready to do something through his church, and we all get to be a part of it. Don't be a spectator. Get involved. God will use you. Even if you're a regular saint in the church, you can pray. You can teach a Bible study. You can talk to people about the Lord. There are things that you can do, and you can impact this generation. And that's what we're here for as the church. If we just had to get the Holy Ghost, we'd all be gone. But God left us here with a purpose, and that's what we need to accomplish.
Thanks again for tuning in to The Conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review this podcast, share this episode with a friend, and subscribe for future content. This podcast is produced by Capital Community Church in Fredericton, New Brunswick. If you're in the area, we would love to have you for one of our weekly services. For service times and more information, please check out capitalcommunity.ca. We look forward to seeing you again next month on The Conversation.